Hello, friends, and welcome to Bible Study Part 2. We are, again, we're in the NIV, okay? Look, the last video I did today that was from Matthew, and I go, whoa, 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 and I tell you why it's wrong to have this word versus that word. So, okay? If you're actually watching these videos and not just complaining in the comments, that's what this is for. So I can find what I don't like and then have a good discussion about it, because it does matter. Okay, so in keeping with that, we are in the book of Hebrews. We're going to do 17 to 31 of chapter 11. That is not going to be the rest of chapter 11. We will continue that tomorrow. And this is a letter written by, they don't really know who, by someone clearly raised in the Jewish faith, going in fulfillment with the scripture line by line, arguing the case why people who are raised Jewish, like this person, raised Jewish, converted to Christianity, need to keep the faith of their Christianity. And he's doing it by telling them, hey, our ancestors didn't have, whimsical faith. I mean, I realize that your friends and family probably want you to go back to being Jewish, and you probably have that pressure. But we don't come from people who take light or faith. So he's talking about, do you have the faith of our forefathers? Because for them, remember, Moses is not, abstract. Abraham's not abstract. These are people they're genetically related to. If they can have this much faith, and that's what made them amazing, you can too. All right? So that's the kind of argument he's making, point by point in these letters. So let's dive in. Verse 17. By faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had received the promises about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring, Greek word for that is seed, will be reckoned. That's Genesis 21:12. Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death because he was spared from death. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau in regard to their future. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. Jacob never stopped worshiping the God of heaven. By faith, Joseph, when his end was near, spoke about the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt and gave instructions about his bones. He didn't want to stay in Egypt. By faith, Moses' parents hid him for 3 months after he was born because they saw he was no ordinary child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of the Pharaoh's daughter, the Pharaoh's grandson. He chose to be mistreated along with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a short time. He regarded disgrace for the sake of Christ as a greater value than the treasures of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward. By faith, he left Egypt, not fearing the king's anger. He persevered because he saw him who is invisible. He saw God. He had communion directly with God. He saw him, saw his intention, saw why God was asking him to put in this work, and said, yes, God, I will put in this work. Without, demanding something in exchange first. By faith, verse 28, by faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. To keep whatever that pathogen was or way that, God was using. Because he's always going to use some sort of method. He uses whatever energy he wants, really. But he uses a method, just like we can see when you scientifically look at things. Like when I was doing the Old Testament study, they're talking about the prophet Ezekiel. He was talking about something that historically happened 200 years after his death. But correctly going through, if you do a little research, in discovering that, people were conquered in this order. So, and that meant what he was predicting could only be true if they were conquered in this order for that thing to happen. And when I go look it up, they were conquered in that order for that thing to happen. It's just that it was written down 200 years before he was born. Well, 200 years before he was dead anyway. Like before it happened. At the time that he predicted this, the country that was conquered eventually was one of two countries that actually fought off the Babylonian attack, which is something Ezekiel is predicting from Israel, not Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, they have Jeremiah. Those two are predicting at the same time to do different sets of kings, the same thing. And it's just Israel first and Jerusalem later. And these two other countries aren't conquered for 200 years later. But it's something that the king of one of those countries said at that time, uttered at that time, that created their destruction 200 years later. Before then, he had considered them perfect. God had considered them perfect. And not Israel, a different country. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, so that the destroyer of the firstborn would not touch the firstborn of Israel. By faith the people passed through the Red Sea. That is the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea, as on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people marched around them for 7 days. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient, or unbelieving. Like they didn't just surrender instead. Sometimes in these stories, especially in the Old Testament stuff, he'll do that. Like, you can survive this exile and even thrive. I will protect you and make sure you thrive even. But you have to surrender to your enemy. You can't get it while you're full of pride and are trying to use force to get what you want. So, let us remember that as we go about the world today. That whole adage of do unto others as you would have others do unto you really does work. If force wouldn't work on you to get people to do what they want, it wouldn't in your heart make you feel overjoyed to help them, why would you think that using force would get someone to want to help you? Why would that be an effective measure? Unless, of course, you're trying to dehumanize the other person, in which case you're already on the wrong foot. No force. If you can't convince them with nice words, then maybe you're wanting something from them that isn't really even justified.